Hey guys, Luton here, welcome back for another episode of Below the Line. Little bit late this week, I'm gonna say, but it's all good. We usually release this on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The way the series works is that in each episode, at the end or toward the end, the second part of each video, I will pose a question, a discussion. You guys leave your thoughts down below in the comments, and then in the next video today, I go over those comments, I pick out some of the best ones, and I read and discuss those comments. Then I'll post another topic, and we go on and on. It's a good way of discussing current trending topics, and it's a good way for me to interact with you guys, the community, because that's what having a YouTube channel is all about. So first off, we were talking about toxicity in gaming, both in chat and voice last time. Start with Microgamer, who says, "Hey LT, pretty new to the channel, but I think as for toxicity in games, the level of control you have over that situation personally as a player is as high as it can be. You just turn the chat off, as you mentioned here, or better in my case, you just laugh it off because I could give a shit about what some randomer in my online game thinks about me. I just play the round out, then I leave the lobby, go back into matchmaking. Also, I've been on YouTube long enough that I remember when hate mail montages used to exist. I am in the same vein as them in hate mail. I love it. The worse it is, the better in my opinion. Yeah, because a lot of this stuff is very, very funny. It's like it's so acidic that it's absurd, because it helps a lot if you rationalize someone saying it to you in real life and then you realize just how stupid it is. He says, secondly, the female to male ratio in game, male or voice over IP, has always been the same. Disgusting is the only word for it. I used to play with a group of female players when I was in high school, and as much as men are pigs to women online, being in a party with female players, the stuff that comes out of their mouths about players is unreal, and just as bad. All of this, I think, stems from one thing, and it's the culture of the world at the moment. The "oh my god, my feelings" culture. People just need to get over words spoken online. It goes on, lastly, I think you're right with voice over IP. It should be disabled from the start, but I don't think game companies have any more power over it themselves. There is a reason things like TeamSpeak and Discord exist. It's because people who are looking for that experience use that software. Those jumping in solo, I wouldn't say aren't entitled to that experience, but just a simple toggle in the options menu fixes that problem easily. Those who are looking for that experience, I think, often know going into the game of choice they want. It's those who get hurled abuse aren't those being tactical in voice over IP, because whether the whole team is participating or not, they still want to sit and listen to the tactical information because it's a blatant advantage to know. You wouldn't ignore someone telling you there was someone around that corner if you're not personally communicating with them. He says, thanks for reading. If you got this far, good work with the series, LT. It's been interesting to come and see the discussion and other people's idea on these topics. And it's like, yeah, that's the thing. It's about listening to other people's ideas. It's about discussing. And, you know, I think we've always had a pretty good community on the channel here, and that's why I sort of decided it'd be a good idea to start this series, because you guys often leave very, very, very good comments, and it's a really constructive way. It's also a good way of sort of re-emphasizing, like, hey, YouTube comments don't have to be a disaster zone. You know, they can actually be useful and constructive sometimes. But this series is also about me picking up different comments, different opinions, not just stuff which constantly agrees with my point of view. So we got JMZ who says, "Hi LT, first off, just want to say thank you for doing the videos, discussing loot boxes and such. Very informative, eye-opening. I have to admit I was on the side of it doesn't affect me, I don't have to buy them, they aren't that bad. But as you said in your videos, that was ignorant and doesn't address the wider issue." He says, thank you for that. But he then goes on to say, to address this specific issue though around toxicity, I'm going to have to say that I disagree. Now, yes, the problem of toxicity is one that will never be solved, it just can't be, and the best way around it is simply getting together a group of friends and playing with them. However, that's restrictive. It prevents me from playing with my friends when they're not on, don't want to, or playing something else, and sometimes I want to be able to just be alone for a while. In these instances, yes, throwing a bunch of people together and saying play nice isn't going to work. However, I don't think that means nothing should be done. He says toxic behaviour should be at the very least discouraged, whether through reporting and subsequent banning or a similar system. Of course, this doesn't 100% solve the problem, but it can, at least in theory, put checks on it, preventing it from going out of control. Stopping the spread to save the whole, as it were. Using your example of throwing people in jail, I think making a blanket statement like they're going to go out and re-offend is just unrealistic. I don't think you were saying that, though. It's true 100% of the time, but I'm going to use it as an example. And yeah, thanks for that clarification, because obviously I'm not saying it's 100% of the time. I'm just kind of making a generalization. And I'm just going to skip over this next little bit. He says, as you said in the video, this does nothing to address the underlying issue, and I agree. However, I would then ask, can the underlying issue be fixed at all? I'm no expert here, of course, but I would have to say, no, I don't think it can. There's no silver bullet or 100% effective solution. I'd actually like to hear ideas of what could be done as a more effective solution? That would be an interesting discussion to have. Basically, to sum up, and to use your example of the worldwide pandemic, it's like treating with a placebo, but when a placebo is all we have, at least it will do something, we hope. And, you know, I can understand where you're coming from. I think it's fair. It's fair to say we should do something rather than nothing. My point is that it's kind of like a token gesture, and I'm never one who's really... I'm not really a fan of token gestures. I'd rather just be aware that it's an issue that we can't solve and go, oh well, you know, we just got to deal with it. But I don't really... I guess my point is like when you say we should do something than nothing, but that was kind of my point as well. My point was that there isn't anything particularly proactive which is going to have any meaningful effect, you know. When you look at toxicity in gaming, or just online in general, it's like there's no meaningful impact short of literally turning the internet into a police state. You know, that's your alternate, you know, if you want to go really sort of full on, then that's where you're at, right? But that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the thing to do in these situations is to make it so that the kind of people who want to, you know, troll or be toxic or whatever to other players, there is something to do, and that thing is nothing. And that sounds kind of stupid, but what I mean is, as I said in the video previously, ignoring those people, sort of blocking them out. And, you know, hey, if they end up having like these absurd conversations with one another, well, fine, go ahead and do that. But the rest of us don't have to deal with it. Do you see what I mean? So it's like, by just kind of blocking it out and saying like, hey, we're actually just not gonna, we're gonna choose to not participate and not give those people a platform, that in and of itself is an action. It's just not a proactive action, it's more kind of passive, and so that's what I feel is personally like the correct choice, the correct way to go with this kind of thing. Because by, you know, banning a few people here and there, it won't solve anything. Like I say, it really is just a token gesture. Okay, next up, Leon, who says, the toxic issue comes down to pressure, and I heard this from a lot of people in the comments. Games like Overwatch League, and to a lesser degree BF4, when you need teamwork and you're on a ranking ladder, the need to perform is high, adding stress on top of stress. Add in the fact that if one guy's going to rage, then that's 20% or more of your team in the shitter. With that combination of pressure, it makes the whole situation very easy to blow up into a toxic mess. And I can understand that, because let's be real, like I get pissed off sometimes. You know, I will rage and be like, oh my god, blah blah blah. The thing is, I don't take it to the chat. That's the thing, I rage it to myself, or if I am playing with somebody else that I play with, they have to hear it. But I don't take it to the chat, and I don't push it onto the public people. Well, not all the time. But I mean, I don't get really full on about it, but I might be like, guys, come on, what the hell are you doing? Blah, blah, fuck's sake, blah, blah, blah. But I don't sort of like rant. As for microbans not being enough, I would point you to former Riot employee Riot Light, who understood that bans are not enough, and that a mix of different and appropriate punishments were needed on top of positive reinforcement. That is very true, which is why League has both a punishment and an honour system. And League is actually a pretty good platform for this. I'm not entirely sure that many people watching this channel would be greatly aware of all of the details and stuff that they do in League, and I'm not even fully aware of all the stuff that they do in League. You'll have to go look it up. But I do know that they have a pretty sophisticated kind of algorithm and systems for, you know, kind of banning and looking at these kind of things. And I am aware that they sort of tried to take this as a holistic view in terms of positive and negative reinforcement. I'd heard that before. And I think from what I remember reading as well, I think it does seem to work for their platform. So there's probably something to be looked into more there. He says it's not perfect, but it's being bolstered and refined on every day. I think that's the thing, you got to take it day to day, you got to kind of continue working forward and kind of let these things develop organically, I suppose. Over time, maybe we will start to see some traction somewhere, and then, you know, that's only a good thing. Okay, next up, Ollie Rigney says, hey LT, personally never saw the point of using in-game voice comms, because whenever I play online games I play with a friend and I just have Discord or similar open to talk to them, but I do know full well how toxic and horrible voice comms can be. A good friend of mine came over to hang out the other day, brought his new gaming laptop, played some games, he booted up PUBG, give it a go, seeing as he'd only just bought it, and the shit hit the fan immediately. He joined the game, and as soon as his character loaded into the starter island, a wave of absolute shit came out of his speakers. That is indeed a massive shock. Racial slurs, sexist crap, just generally insulting, demeaning things. One guy on the island ran past my friend chasing another character whose in-game avatar was black and yelling the N-word. Yeah, that's 2017. Other horrible crap after him, as the guy he was chasing was screaming at him to piss off and leave him alone. I would argue, why did he not just turn off chat, as pretty much everybody does, but it's fair enough, it's a fair example. I think your analogy of the bully fits pretty well, but I think there's another layer on top of that. While not causing toxicity certainly makes it easier for some to become toxic and rude, it's the anonymity. People feel far more free to shout abuse at people when nobody knows who they are. Again, this is obvious, we all know this for the longest time. They don't have to worry about the guy they're abusing turning up at their house because the bully is just one of millions of anonymous online players. Again, it's just the internet. It works the other way around. People are far more likely to be a dick to somebody in-game because it's somebody they don't know. They'd hardly go into a game and have a friend or someone they know on the other team and then be a complete asshole to them unless they're a grade A dick. Overall, I think that while yes, in-game voice comms are a nice idea and can be used properly for their intended purpose, in reality, there are always people who are going to not hesitate to scream abuse down the mic at you purely because the function is there. Thanks for time to read this, LT. I think it's all pretty standard fare, isn't it? It's, you know, it's anonymity, people being able to get away with what they want to say. We know this, it's just a case of, you know, restating this and understanding it. Legion says, I agree with you, there's a lot of toxicity in the gaming community. I think it's because nobody has to fear real consequences. So again, see, ties in there. Being a dick to others. What I find is that most toxic people just want to troll, get a laugh out of it, because they're bored. I think systems like Valve's Overwatch Committee, I forget if it's actually called that, where an established community member can view file cases and judge them for bad behaviour, mostly cheating or griefing, are a good step in the right direction. But even with, say, 500 different people watching the cases and judging that person guilty of harassing another, there's no real way to get rid of him, even through a ban. That person just might wait for the next sale, buy the game again, repeat the process. He says, in all honesty, I've given up trying to find a way to get rid of toxic behaviour, and this is what I've been saying, you see, is that, you know, anything that you try to do is a token gesture. It doesn't really solve that, and you could just say, well, LT, you know, that's too defeatist an attitude. It's not, it's just realistic. Like, you're just not going to be able to get rid of it. If people really want to be a dick, they will be, and that's the end of it. So he says, in all honesty, I've given up on trying to find a way to get rid of toxic behaviour in video games because, as you said in the video with the bully example, most of the time this toxicity is born outside of the gaming community. For example, somebody's parents neglecting them, or not teaching them manners, buying them COD to make them shut the fuck up. So there's not a lot we can actually do about it, other than to then just ignore these people. Yeah, I honestly think that's the best way forward with this. He goes on to say that when it comes to harassment towards women in games, it comes back to the near immunity and anonymity on the internet. Although I've met a lot of guys who are very polite toward girls or women in game, there are at least 5 guys that scream profanities because they don't have to fear consequences. I think if everybody have to use their ID as their profile in game, where you can actually see who they are, where they're from and so on, then you're not an anonymous player among thousands. A lot of people would stop harassing others because they aren't untouchable anymore. But of course, this probably won't ever happen. But fortunately, there are still many great games out there with amazing communities, such as Arma Warframe PlanetSide, with many outfits, clans and groups to welcome new players. They put great emphasis on good social skills. So maybe not all the hope is lost. I mean, the thing is that, yeah, it's not just those kind of games that are social. All games really have the ability to create and forge their own communities, especially now you have things like Discord. So it's like, and you know, with things like Overwatch, you know, there is a very great amount of female players who play Overwatch, for example. And the thing is that, you know, you're always going to get, and this is the point, with that kind of internet anonymity and all this kind of stuff, it's a known sort of issue. It's a known issue that people just generally tend to act out and behave like dicks. And so, you know, because that's a known quantity, you can actively take choices to kind of evade and escape that. And that's why often people choose to move into more closed communities. But you see, where I take away is it's kind of sad because, you know, gaming, from my mind anyway, the nice thing with gaming is it's always kind of like, you know, you do like to imagine that it's inclusive and you do like to imagine that you can just meet other people, but less and less that happens. You know, it did used to happen more, where people could actually just sort of meet up and be like, hey, do you want to do this? And it's not that that never happens. Like, you can have that happen where you suddenly find, oh, hey, like, this guy I'm playing with, things are going pretty well. And then that's when you can sort of try to message them. But it's like, these people who behave like complete assholes, just totally deplorable people, you know, they are actually infringing and sort of damaging the likelihood of that happening because people are more likely to just turn off all forms of communication. One thing that was always quite good with, like, for example, like PlayStation Network, and you know, this is it is workable sometimes with some PC games, where some PC games, if they're multiplayer, will actually enable you to kind of like see, for example, who you most recently played with, and then you're able to actually actively message them after a round or whatever. And the same goes for PlayStation. Like, if you recognize the person you're playing with, you could always like remember their PSID and then like message them later or whatever. So there are options for you to kind of be able to connect with other people actively. And again, if that person sends you a dickish message where you can just, you know, block them or whatever. But there were ways of sort of connecting with other people. So maybe again, it's just like, you know, yeah, we can still connect with people, but we just have to be a bit more proactive and actively involved in the process of doing so. And that's kind of annoying and frustrating, but, you know, it is what it is, I guess. Okay, Fark says, Toxicity. My first experience of multiplayer gaming was COD, probably the definition of a toxic community. It's such a simple game that muting everybody other than real life friends or friends of friends was the norm. And that is kind of like a good point, and that's kind of the point that I alluded to, is a lot of the time it's not super necessary, especially in today's world, that you actually have to be able to communicate. You can, and I often say, if you're actually like a good player or a decent player, you don't even need to. You can just look around you and go, okay, they're there, I know what I need to do. You know, there's not often tons of communication required in most public games anyway. He says, in fact, people only turn on their mics to troll or talk smack. It really depends on the game and whether players want to interact socially or objectively to improve performance within the game. In my experience, it's extremely rare to chat with total randoms. If the game generally has guilds or clans developed around it, it's even less likely that you're going to then be talking to randoms. For example, I play Destiny with clanmates, but not once in over 3 years have I spoken with a random player, not even in social hubs. Okay, lastly, Blue Fabbit says, you've got a good argument, but there are some flaws with the argument of toxicity. In any competition-oriented activity, there's an element of shit-talking that has to be allowed. Does it? Does it have to be allowed? It is part of the competitive nature of people to get into the head of your opponent and to cause them to make mistakes. Again, I question whether that's really a thing that happens. That is where a lot of the shit-talking comes into play. Is it? Again, is it? It's just an ingrained tactic. It's a tactic now in communities of gamers. It's also used as humor. Again, I think depending on what people are saying, it might not be that funny, especially among friends who shit talk and make jabs at compatriots in good fun. Again, those are your friends though, it's a totally different thing, but that point is subtle motivation. In examples, if you're told you're playing like shit by a friend, you strive to do better. Again, that's not what we're talking about though, because that's a push to make you do better, be on a par with them. However, if the enemy team says you're playing like shit, you start to get defensive because of the more competitive nature, and you start to make mistakes because your brain goes, I'll show them, and you stop focusing on playing well and taking more risks in an attempt to save face. Again, some people might do that, but I wouldn't, and I don't know many people who would. And quite honestly, if people just started talking crap, the first thing I'll do is just be like, oh Jesus, just turn it off. The first thing I do is just turn it off and blank it. So again, I'd be interested to hear other people's feedback related to this comment and see whether they think it's valid, but for me personally, I don't think it holds any weight really. Okay, he goes on though and says, the line has to be drawn, however, because there is a limit to shit talking as banter and as a tactic and actual targeted hate. That limit comes when it is outside of the game. If I'm playing against someone and talking shit to them in-game to throw off their game, that is one thing. It is another thing entirely if after the game I send them messages or I go out of my way to find them and to spew vitriol. Those are the cases that need to be cracked down on, where it stops being a tactic in the heat of the game and starts being targeted harassment. Toxicity itself is too broad a term because it doesn't make the distinction between shit-talking and banter versus actual harassment. So game devs like those at Blizzard and Activision want to curb all instances of potential shit-talking and banter for the fear that it might be construed as hate and harassment. This is a knee-jerk reaction. To use an analogy, this type of control is only serving cold coffee because you're afraid that if it's even slightly warm, heated banter, somebody might get burned or offended. Now, I kind of mainly disagree with this. I can understand sort of what you're saying, but I think I just don't know anybody that would view it really that way. Now, we do have discussions within Arma about kind of like, you know, how aggressive you should reply to people in game, and that some people are just not up for that, some people don't look for that, some people don't want it, and you know, we've been discussing that with some of our group recently. But when it comes to public games, I think it's actually sort of counterproductive. I think that if, and you know, most of the time, because people don't know you, they won't put any weight on the things that you're saying. That's my kind of point of view here, is that, you know, if I know a person and I know their capabilities, like, you know, any of the guys I play with, you know, give an example, and, you know, they start saying like, oh my God, step it up. What the hell are you doing? What are you doing over there? I'd think like, oh damn, you know, they know me and they know what we're doing. I better sort myself out. if it's just some random, I'd be like, dude, you don't know me, you don't know what I've done or what I can, and I've had this before in games. More often than not, it just makes me kind of be like, ugh, like eye roll and just like close the chat. So I don't really think that people are going to suddenly be like, oh my god, this guy's talking to me, like I better sort myself out. I think most people literally would just block it immediately. So I just don't think there's any weight there. I do think that it's correct to say though that toxicity itself is a very broad term, and that, like I was saying in the first video, they are lumping in stuff like GGEZ, which is really soft. That's a very passive interpretation of what could be toxicity. When I think of toxicity, I think of people making like racial slurs, sexist slurs, or just generally very, very aggressive methods of speaking to another people, lots of cursing and all this kind of stuff. And again, it's like, that in and of itself doesn't offend me though. I don't sort of think like, oh my god, and you know, like go to bed thinking about it. That's not it at all. It's just more like, oh dude, I can't be bothered with this, I'm trying to play the game. You know, it's just like it's a distraction and irritation, which I suppose goes towards what you were trying to say there, that, you know, it can get in the heads of other people. But the thing is, it doesn't get into my head to the point that it distracts you from the game. It's like a momentary thing where you're just like, whatever dude, fucking, you know, block, damn, you know, you just hit H, hide, you know, it's gone. So it's there. But whilst it's interesting to hear from people and have their perspectives in there, this hasn't really altered my opinion here today. Like my perspective on this is still like, look, you're online, yes, you're in a kind of closed community as opposed to the internet at large, but you know, implementing these kind of smaller scale things is really not going to do anything. I mean, if you really do want to achieve something in terms of dissuading this kind of thing, then it has to be something more down the lines of what Riot are doing with League and stuff, where, you know, it's kind of like you incentivize people positively to work together whilst at the same time reprimanding people who just refuse to be anything other than negative. And, you know, it also depends on like how willing a company as well, at the end of the day, how willing a company is to be willing to shut out members of their community, because some companies just don't care. You know, some companies, they just kind of actively are like, yeah, come one, come all, we just care about bums on seats. You know, we're not fussed like how you behave or how you act. We don't care about that. We just want people in our game, playing our game. We just want the numbers. So again, you know, you got that to contend with. And I think that's the other thing to remember, is that there's no sort of generally agreed upon method to address that. And I think unless you had that as well, maybe even just say across big companies, like let's say all the big companies got together, like EA, Ubisoft, maybe laughably Activision, but you know, that's the kind of thing you would need. You need like a kind of a connected cooperative approach to really deal with anything like this, until you get like a big, like sort of like a charter or something, you know, where people like they sign up to it and say like, yeah, we're gonna across the board deal with this in a certain way. But you know, as I've been looking at it, look at the kind of insanity where you have stuff with the bans. The large scale thing is that or the most broad example is that companies just don't care. They don't care enough about that detail because it doesn't really affect them. You know, it doesn't really affect them in any meaningful monetary way. I suppose the only thing would be was, you know, if a game started to become known for having a really full-on toxic community. But again, because it is everywhere, it's not specific, and so, you know, it doesn't really affect anybody, I would say, in a really significantly major way, to the point where it's affecting their game. Because again, most of the time, most people who are in gaming understand that the way to deal with this and the way to address it is to simply block it out. So when it comes to Blizzard and Overwatch and they're trying to implement new algorithms, you know, fair play, do whatever you want, knock yourself out. But if you start kind of accidentally penalising people that shouldn't be for the sake of it, then we're going to have some big problems. And like I say, for me personally, the best solution, ignore it, hide it, shut it down, just get back on with the game. Just get on with the game. Just get on with the game. Okay, now we come to part 2 of the video, guys. This is where I post a discussion or an opinion or some kind of topic for you guys to discuss. Now today, really, it's kind of like a kind of update on previous stuff, because it's again about loot crates, but specifically because World War II Call of Duty is out, and it's terrible because it's bad enough having, of course, loot crates and stuff, but now the sheer insanity of Call of Duty World War II with its spectating of loot boxes. You have daily orders now. You've got your standard fare there, special order, win a match in every standard game mode. You think fair? Oh yeah, and then just the old loot spectator. You know, watch 3 supply drops being opened to get your social score up. what kind of terrifyingly bad game are they trying to make here, where one of the things that they want you to do every day is stand around and watch other people opening this stuff? And, you know, I watched the Jim Sterling video this week, and again, he was kind of onto this as well, where he's talking about, like, look, it's not the same as the matchmaking thing that they got patented, Activision got patented, where they were trying to, like, pair players together to try and incentivize and thereby have them do microtransactions, maybe to pair up with better people. But it's definitely along that kind of feeling. It's along that kind of sentiment where it's kind of like, hey, you are watching other people, which may sort of incentivize you by seeing the cool stuff that they get. Think, damn, you know, like maybe I should get on that too. They're actively trying to make people gamble in the game. It is gambling. It's such BS. And again, like we were talking about, how come Activision gets such little stick of this compared to what we've seen with EA? Now, going back to EA, they don't get away with this scot-free either, because going back to the EA stuff, EA CEO Andrew Wilson has said that when it comes to loot boxes, that was a conversation not specific to Battlefront 2. If you want to digest that and break it down, basically what he's saying is, everybody's doing it. You know, it's kind of like, he's like, oh yeah, everyone, it's just open season for loot boxes now. Why are you penalising us? Everybody's doing it. We should be able to do it too. And then he adds that feedback from the beta was very positive. Now, you know, you can interpret that two ways. You can interpret that he was saying, hey, look, overall feedback was positive, so this thing about the loot crates is not a big deal. Why are people freaking out about it? Or you could interpret it, I wasn't sure whether he's saying that feedback about the loot boxes was positive. I'm pretty sure he's saying just about the beta in general. But what I said on Twitter yesterday was, buckle up, Battlefield fans. You think that the EA CEO saying that loot boxes are a conversation not specific to Battlefront 2 is not meaningful? You don't think that that's meaningful? You don't think that they have seen that they can get away with this, even in a light respect, and that this isn't going to be coming to that next Battlefield game? Remember when I was having like conversations on Twitter a week or so ago, and there were other YouTube producers who were relating to me and trying to downplay this and trying to be really dismissive and going like, hey, you know, maybe it's okay if it's just for aesthetic items. Hey, I'm not going to buy any of these loot boxes, so it's going to be okay. Also, by the way, just a reminder that there are still going to be guns in the Battlefront 2 loot boxes, because they haven't got rid of them. They have downplayed it and they have scaled it back, but there are still going to be weapons. It still says weapons are locked behind specific milestones, but a select few will be found in crates. The rest can be attained only by play. Well, I said that's all very good. Let's hope that those few select weapons in those loot crates are not OP as hell. And I also said, you know, because I can't think of any other game that EA produces where they spend like the whole year making tweaks and fixes to guns because they needed balancing, right? You know, that's not going to be something that's going to happen. That's never happened in previous games where there have been specific weapons that have been bonkersly OP and took quite a while before they got patched out. Maybe, you know, maybe they leave those select few guns in those weapon crates at the release and they tend to be pretty powerful and they don't get patched out until down the line, you know, until people have had a little good while to kind of grind out those loot boxes to get them. You know what I mean? Read between the lines. So unimpressed. I think the situation for loot boxes is dire. I think Battlefield, it's scaling up like it's going to be a disaster. If they go down that route, it really will. I can see no positive outcome from this current situation with loot boxes and loot crates. It continues to be an absolutely appalling nightmare. Tell me what you think, guys, about some of these changes. Tell me what you think about the World War II stuff. I mean, I can't imagine that anybody's going to have anything good to say about that. It's going to be insane. Really, I guess my question for you today is, you know, where are we going to see the end of this? And what kind of further action can we take? What kind of action would you like to see YouTubers make? Somebody said previously that I should try to essentially kind of get other producers on board to sort of stand together, and I said that's not really my role, it's not really my job, you know, it's not up to me to tell other producers like what they should or shouldn't say on their channel. I can say to them like, hey, oh, this is my opinion, and then if they think like, hey, LT's right about that, I should do something about that too. But you know how it goes with YouTube, you can't really go around like saying to people, hey, you should put this on your channel. It doesn't work like that. But all I can do is put my opinion out there. You guys as viewers can, of course, go and make your own feelings known to other producers. I'm not saying go and spam other people's channels. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, just as a natural course of being, you know, any kind of subscriber on any channel, you know, people give their opinions about things, and you know, then that YouTube producer may look at their comment section and go, hey, you know, there's 1 or 2 people talking about this. Maybe that's something I want to discuss. But I think until you start to see like a kind of broader range of people, and I mean like a broad range, like outside of just gaming YouTube producers, I think you need to see like big networks talking about this stuff. You're going to need to see the mainstream kind of gaming media talking about this stuff, which by the way they are. I was actually quite pleased to see many of the big gaming news discussion stuff like Kotaku and Polygon and you know, all these kind of things. Again, we all have opinions on where they are with everything, but the fact that it's being covered and discussed in and of itself, you know, actually a pretty positive step forward. But yeah, again, just tell me what you think there. Tell me whether you think that this is going to be a thing in Battlefield. You know, do you think it's almost a certainty at this point, or do you still hold out hope that they might see the light and actually realise that this is an appallingly terrible thing and they won't put it in the game? For me, I'm not so positive, but then I never am I? So there you go. Alright, thanks for watching Below the Line, guys. We'll be back next Tuesday. I look forward to your comments for then. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.